Welcome to episode 39 of After the Breach podcast. We're your hosts, Jeff and Sara. Ahoy, Sara.
Hey, Jeff. Welcome back.
Thank you. You too. We are just back from the Silver Bank, north of the Dominican Republic. We had our podcast charter out there.
So great.
So awesome. We're going to talk today with Alex and Mikayla, who are part of our crew here at Maya's Legacy Whale Watching, and they joined us on the podcast trip to the Silver Bank, and we're going to have them join us in a moment. We're going to talk about the highlights, and it was their very first time on the Silver Bank, so we're going to get the impressions from first-timers.
And just a big shout-out to all of our listeners that joined us on this trip, because we couldn't have done it without you. And we did try to record a podcast on the boat, but the microphones were just so sensitive that they picked up everything.
The boat noise, people from other parts of the boat.
We wanted to have you on, and, potentially we still could, arrange to have you guys Zoom in sometime and chat about the trip. So, but until then, we have Alex and Mikayla joining us to talk all about the Silver Bank. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex and Mikayla, for joining us. It's about time we have had you on the podcast. It's been a long time coming. We just got back from the Silver Bank. It was amazing. We had a great time. Jeff and I have been a few times, but this was your first time down there swimming with humpback whales, and so we wanted to chat with you guys about that.
Excited to get some of your impressions and feelings and highlights as first timers to the Silver Bank. And yeah, we had an incredible week. It was really amazing, some amazing encounters, and lots of mom calf pairs. One standout mom calf pair in particular, TW and her calf.
Yeah, but before we jump in, Jeff, why don't you just give a really brief overview of where we were, how we get there, that kind of thing.
Okay, and so if you haven't listened before, we did an episode about the humpbacks of the Silver Bank. It was episode 7. The Silver Bank is 70 miles offshore of the north coast of the Dominican Republic, and there it is just a small part of the marine mammal sanctuary of the Dominican Republic. And the Silver Bank is the largest breeding and calving waters for the North Atlantic humpback whales. And so during this time of year, there are quite a huge number of humpbacks there for breeding and calving. And the Dominican Republic has done a phenomenal job of allowing vessels to go out there and run week-long liveaboards. They permit 3 vessels to go out there, 3 operators, and just to a very small part of the Silver Bank. And you are really surrounded by humpback whales out there, and they are permitted to do in-water encounters with resting humpbacks. There's lots of rules and lots of etiquette to do this properly and respectfully. And you get into the water with resting whales and see what you get. Sometimes, they're not really into your company and they just swim off and you're done and you go find some other humpbacks. But when you're lucky, you get some really relaxed humpback whales that, sometimes you're not sure who's watching who.
Especially this week.
We had some incredible encounters. But I want to start with you two, Alex and Mikayla, and hear some of your initial impressions from things like the
maybe not the crossing.
Let's start with the crossing. I mean, when we talked about this in episode 7, but it's a big crossing. It's not an easy trip. It takes, it can take 8 hours to get out there, and you're going through open ocean, very deep waters, and the conditions that come with that.
And to be fair, this time we didn't have a lot of prep for when we were leaving. It was we were going to leave in the afternoon, and then all of a sudden it was we're leaving now, and nobody had time to take Dramamine.
Nobody had time for anything. In fact, I was at risk of getting left behind.
You were about to get off the boat.
Yeah, we were supposed to leave that evening, and it was about just before 8 a.m., and I was getting ready to go out for a run. And I had my running gear on, and I was just chatting. And Alex, you said to me, you're like, we heard the motor start, and you said to me, you said, "Are we leaving?" And I said, "No, we're not leaving till tonight." they must be doing something with maintenance or something like that. And I was getting ready to go. And Gene came out and said, change of plans. We're leaving in 5 minutes. So I'm glad I didn't go for a run any earlier than that. It would have been kind of funny to come back from my run with the boat gone.
It wouldn't have been funny. Wouldn't have been funny. Well, maybe later.
But yeah,
But right.
let's start. Let's talk about how'd you guys do with the crossing?
Well, first, thanks for having us on. Like, very thrilled to be on After the Breach podcast, the famous After the Breach podcast. Yeah, the crossing, like you said, a little unexpected, and there was a case where one of the other boats did have some people out on a run in the morning and couldn't leave at the same time as us, unfortunately. But we were able to get out there, and it was just the day after a big storm. The reason that the Navy wouldn't even let us leave, even if we had wanted to. So there was some pretty big water, and I was pretty sick. I was pretty sick.
You handled it like a pro, even though you were sick.
Yeah, not uncommon. Once you get out to the bank, it's protected and calm waters. But yeah, getting out there, and that was a pretty big crossing.
Yeah.
This was my that was my 8th week doing this over the last like 15 years, and sometimes they're pretty good, sometimes they're pretty big, and this was definitely one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. Some people had it much worse than I did, but I just remember Sarah looking at me and being like, "Are you gonna throw up?" And I was like, "Yeah," but I didn't. And I just pretty much laid in a fetal position in the saloon or salon, and I'd poke my head up at Alex every once in a while, make sure he was okay, and then try to go back to sleep. But we made it. So.
And it was worth the crossing.
It was worth the crossing. It was so worth it, and I kept thinking that's what was getting me through the crossing the whole way out. I kept on thinking about the episode of After the Breach when you guys had David on, and he was talking about down to Antarctica and that crossing the Drake, and how you have to go through some ordeal. You have to put yourself through something to be able to experience something so incredible. And I kept telling myself that as we were heading out there. I was like, this is one of the trials. I just have to get through this, and then I can enjoy the week.
Yeah, I think it was Brandy who at the end of the week, like as we were getting ready to leave, was like, I would have thrown up for 10 days straight just to have this week.
I forgot about that. That's right. Yeah, and yeah, we didn't mention this was our After the Breach podcast charter, so we had lots of listeners with us. We filled the entire boat, and
shout out to all of you.
Yeah, had a phenomenal week out there, and I'm thrilled with the encounters we had and how it worked out, and the experience that we all had.
Yeah, it was such a fun group of people.
I'm curious your impressions, like from like the first time you got in the water and that first look at seeing humpback whales for your very first time in the water, because it's an incredible experience. It's hard to put into words, but it is, having done this multiple times, that first look, it never gets old, and it always is so impactful. That first time you see that shiny illuminated white pec fin, and then you see the entire body of the whale submerged. And it's just, I'd love to hear your impressions and what was going through your mind when you had that experience.
I didn't even know what to look for. I'm so used to whale watching and finding whales and spotting whales. It's what I get paid to do, but that's at the surface. When we got in the water, underwater, I'm looking around, and the visibility depended so much on the day and the time of day and how deep the water was. And I think our very first swim, we kind of got a little bit more distant looks. It was nice, just kind of practice run almost, where really that is the first thing you see, is that like illuminated bright white pec fin, or both pec fins on either side maybe. And I had to keep repeating to myself, that is a humpback whale. You are looking at a humpback whale in the water. You're in the water with a humpback whale right now. I just couldn't even believe it. It felt so surreal.
Yeah, I kind of like blacked out every time. I don't know. yeah, it's like Jeff said, you don't really have words, and it's like hard to comprehend that you're in the water with this whale. It's just, yeah, it's crazy.
It is. I mean, even, I've done it a few times now, and there was one time that like I gave Ian my camera, and I was just like enjoying the swim, and we had resting adults, and I think I was next to you, Mikayla. I was just like floating there, looking at this whale, and thinking to myself, I'm swimming with a freaking humpback whale. A freaking humpback whale.
Yeah.
One of the things that always amazes me is how aware they are of us in the water when they're surfacing, and sometimes they come by on a close pass, and you're just floating there watching them, and I think everybody's thinking like, are they getting too close? But they're so incredibly aware of where we are, what we are, and they always seem to turn so that they can get as good a look as we're getting.
Yeah, and from a very young age, as with TW's calf.
Yes.
So I think all of us probably had a pretty amazing encounter with TW's calf, floppy disco. I think that's
disco,
what they call her.
That is.
And I think all of us at some point were on the boat watching the other tender in the water with the calf, who was very, very curious and going, did that whale just hit somebody? So, first encounter is amazing, but how was that? Like, what going through your mind as this calf was like coming up really like feet from you?
I mean, that was like our second or third swim on the first day was this experience with TW and her calf, and how that goes is so often the mom is kind of just chilling down at the bottom, just resting much deeper, and that calf is coming up every 3 to 5 minutes. So you're seeing a lot of that calf. And there was definitely a couple of times where, like the other Jeff was saying, that it looked like it wants to play human bowling. It's coming right at you real quick. And then it turns and it flops around and it turns upside down and it's really looking at you, and you kind of get used to the size of this animal. So the first time that mom came up to look, I was like, oh, I thought that I was watching humpback whale. This is so much bigger than I ever could have imagined. Like the sheer size of a adult female humpback whale right next to you, after just being like kind of getting used to the size of a calf and being up close to a calf, and you think that's ginormous. When you get right next to an adult, that is, I felt the tiniest I have ever felt in my life.
In a great way.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a great way.
Yeah, and they know where you are, but they come pretty close sometimes, and you're supposed to stay still. But there were moments where I was kicking my feet as hard as I could, because they look like they're coming right at you, and your instinct is to move around. But yeah, it's crazy. Those adults, they're just so big. I remember that first day seeing TW just kind of like face on towards me, and it was just crazy. It's like in Nemo when Marlin and Dory, they're like, oh, what, krill? Right behind them is this big whale. That's kind of what I would compare to. You can cut that out if you want.
No, I like that. I like that analogy.
Yeah, we had some amazing encounters with TW and floppy disco. And having done this, so this was my 8th week. I did stay on the following week, so I've done this 9 times. And the week that we were on, that was some of the best mom calf encounters I've had in all the weeks that I've been there. A lot of times you'll get calves that, they're so into mom, and mom is such the focal point of their lives at that point, that a lot of times you're just a complete observer, which is awesome. You're just seeing them interact. You're seeing sometimes the mom will bring the calf up on a rostrum, but the calf doesn't really pay all that much attention to the people in the water. The week we were out there, and especially with TW and floppy disco was very curious to every surfacing of coming by the line of people, and the eye contact was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some good encounters with the other calf too. We ended up naming after Alex.
Maybe Alex.
And that calf was also quite comfortable with us too. We got some good looks at that one. So yeah,
I was impressed at how comfortable the moms were about,
Mm-hmm.
especially these calf behaviors. So several times the calf was between us and mom, and several times the calf would swim around the other side of us, and we would be between the mom and the calf. And it really, these particular moms didn't seem to mind too much at all. They seemed pretty comfortable in the water with us, sometimes even coming up to check us out, and then just going back down and resting, while the calves were sort of swimming circles around us some days.
Yeah, I feel like, and something I expressed kind of after my first trip down there was like, what a privilege to be trusted by these whales that, like some of them could potentially be old enough that, they were alive during the end of commercial whaling, but that they're trusting you with their baby, right? That you're there and they are just content resting and letting their calf come up and check out these creatures.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that we learned on the trip from Conscious Breath Adventures, and big shout out to them and the way that they do this and the way they operate their trips. But interestingly, a lot of the whales, either adults or moms with calves that we encounter down there that seem to be really trusting of people in the water, they have a scar along their jaw from feeding on certain bait fish, sandlance, where they feed along the bottom and they get scarred. And this is a common feeding behavior that's seen up in the Stellwagen Bank off the coast of New England. And that is an area where there is a lot of whale watching. There's a lot of commercial traffic. There's fishing. There's recreational traffic. So the theory is that these whales are actually very acclimated to boats and to people, and they're very aware of what's going on. And it does seem like most of the really good encounters that you have on the Silver Bank, not all of them, but a lot of them, the whales have that scar, and they are Stellwagen Bank and further north of there in the feeding months, including TW. TW has that scar.
And Jeff, you have actually swam with TW before.
That's right. 2 years ago, I swam with TW, who had a calf back then in 2023. And when I swam with TW and her calf, she had a male escort, and the male escort stole the show in those encounters. Whereas this year, it was the calf, it was Floppy Disco that really stole the show.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said for when you're not in the water and when you're just watching the whales, being able to see the white flukes from under or not flukes, heckmans from under the water, and just the breaching and all the activity that you watch, or like rowdy groups. The whale watching just from the boat is also incredible.
Yeah, and not just from the tender, but from the big boat as well.
Yeah, I mean, you really are surrounded by humpbacks. The analogy that I always give, it's the closest you can be to going to another planet. I mean, everything out there is all about humpbacks, and you're seeing them from first light until last light. They're just everywhere out there. And yeah, the surface activity is really, really phenomenal.
And it really does feel like another world. I like that you say that, because it is so foreign to us. I mean, being out there 80 miles off the coast, no land in sight, and it very much feels like their world. Like that is the humpback's world. That is their place, and you get in the water with them, and you experience them in their world. And the thing that sticks with me the most is looking these humpback whale in the eye. Some days they come up to you, the calf's eye is so wide, and they're so curious. And Captain Gene Flipsy, who you guys just had on the show before, was saying that some of these calves are so young that it's very likely that they've never even experienced fear before. They just have this incredible sense of wonder that they're looking around at everything with these wide eyes. That's what really got me. That's what got my heart. And for everybody, it felt like it was something different, where like there's a little bit of tears starting to come. We dropped the hydrophone one day, that got a couple people, but these big wide eyes and this sense of wonder from these cats, some of them just 4 or 5 weeks old. The word life changing gets thrown around it a lot, but it really, really is. I've experienced whales before up in the Salish Sea in Friday Harbor, and I've looked a whale in the eye before, but it's always I'm in my world, they're in theirs, right? Like they're in the water, I'm on a boat or on shore. Here, you are fully immersed in their world, and that was unreal to me. It's like being on a different planet.
Yeah, there were multiple times where Alex and I would look at each other and just be like, "What are we doing here? Like, it is just crazy, you know?"
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's life-changing. It's absolutely incredible. The eye contact, and even with the calves, it's amazing to me that they come up for a breath and then they turn towards the people and they're swimming straight out at the people. And you know, your instinct is like, oh my God, like they're going to make contact, yet they don't. Like there's even at that
at least
young
not physically.
age, right? Right, exactly. At that young age, they want to come in for a close look, and they turn and they show you their belly so that they can see you with both their eyes, and they're feet away from you, but they don't. They know the barrier. They know when to turn and how to not make physical contact.
Yeah, I think I do feel like they still are making contact, just not physically, right? I mean, we know they're very tactile animals with their moms, but I think there's other ways that they make contact.
And then it's amazing because then when they're done, they go back down, and it's really just like heartwarming to see. They go and tuck in under mom's pec fin or under her chin, and just wait there until their next breath. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is incredibly adorable to see, and we got to see a lot of mom and calf interactions. And there was one day where, we had just been in the water with, I think it was CW and her calf. We did get to swim with them quite a bit. Luckily, we were very fortunate. And one of the swims, I said, you know what, Jeff, I'm going to leave my GoPro. I'm going to leave my camera on the boat. I'm just going to experience that one. He was like, really? You don't think you're going to miss anything? I said, I think I've seen everything that I've expected to see out of a mom and calf. I'm just going to go in and experience it. And Jeff said, okay, well, everybody, I'm definitely bringing my camera then. And we get in the water and we see the calf start to nurse. And that was just incredible. And I'm so glad that I did just get to experience that. But at the same time, I wish that I had captured that on video, seeing this calf come right up behind mom and start to nurse, and they start to swim off. But luckily, they kind of just stayed put. And normally when a calf starts to nurse, they told us that they swim away, and that's usually the end of the swim. But they stuck around and we got to experience that a bit more. It was pretty incredible to see.
That was amazing. That was the first time I had ever seen nursing, and just incredible to see.
Well, they don't see it, I mean, very often, or
Yeah, I think my understanding is typically when they are nursing, they're moving.
Yeah.
And when they're moving, we can't be in the water with them because you can't keep up with a humpback whale even when they're moving slowly.
I think that was the day that I was on the other boat at that point. And then you guys were like, come over. Like everybody on my boat was like, yeah, we've had a great day. We're ready to go back to the big boat.
Yeah, and I was like,
come over.
Yeah, Sarah, you got to come over to our boat.
And then we had like, I don't know, arguably one of there's so many great swims, but that last swim we had with TW's calf was unreal.
That was, I think, in my 2 weeks, that was one of the biggest highlights, because that was a very unique swim with a mom and calf that I had never really experienced, because they were moving, but they weren't they were still resting, but they were very, very slowly moving to the point where we could swim alongside them, parallel to them. And we can post a link to video in the show notes. The calf came up with mom and then moved over and was between mom and us, and was rolling around and swimming next to us. And it really, like, all I felt was, this is a whole new level of swimming with whales. It's one thing to go swimming with whales, but this was swimming with a whale. Like the whale was swimming alongside of all the people, and then would go back to mom, and then would come back over to the people, and it was incredible. And I think that was the one you decided not to bring your GoPro, Alex.
Yep, that sounds right.
Thanks for being the
Someone's
sacrificial
got to
lamb.
be the sacrifice. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was really an incredible encounter, and just took that to a whole new level that I had never experienced.
Well, we had amazing encounters with moms and calves, but we had another amazing encounter. Jeff, you were on the other boat. The three of us were on the other tender, and we both got it. We both had this encounter. I think you guys had a little bit longer of a in water with these two dancers, which I never, ever, 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 ever
No,
thought I'd ever see.
Never. Definitely one of the more rare experiences that they get out there. I had never experienced this before. Always was very curious about it, and they referred to them as dancers. And it will be typically it's adults. It's two adults, typically a male and female. Although sometimes they said it can be two males. But typically it's a male and female. They think it's part of courting. They
like an audience.
Yeah. And, jump in if I'm not explaining this perfectly, but they end up, it really is like dancing, and they're very acrobatic, very slow in the water, very acrobatic, twirling peck fins out, and they often get a little bit fixated or involve the swimmers or the tender.
Mm-hmm.
When they're doing this. And I've always been really curious about it. It happens, I think, once or twice a season. I've never seen it before. And we had this incredible morning. We were out, and Gene was our guide that day, and he got in the water. We had two resting adults. He got in the water, and they swam off, but he said that the escort, before they swam off, came up and did a really close pass and was checking him out. And he said, let's stay with them and just watch from the surface, because this could turn into something. And we stayed with them. We were with them for, it was probably about an hour. And we were just watching, and they went into the coral heads, into really shallow water. I don't think they were in 20 feet of water, which is incredible for a humpback. And these coral heads come right up to the surface, and they were doing these 90-degree turns. And then they started resting again. And we got in the water, and they were totally chill. And we were one or two breath cycles into our encounter, and they were just resting, and they would come up, and they didn't give us really close looks, but you could tell they were kind of checking us out on their surfacings. And then all of a sudden, they were like traveling from left to right, and then the female does this 180 upside down. And she's now swimming the opposite direction with her belly up towards the surface, but she's submerged. And I'm like, I've never seen that before. Like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, she spy hops, and like right by us. And I heard Gene get very excited about it. And I'm like, is this what I think it is? And it was. And she started, as she's spy hopping, she put her peck fins out, and she was turning, and she came right up to the line and tucked her peck fins in so she could get closer. And yeah, of all the times where you're like, oh my God, I'm really close, that was the one time where I was like, what am I supposed to do? But I was right next to Gene, so I'm like, I know I'm okay. And we were all in a very tight group. And I heard Gene yell to the tender driver, call the other tender right now, get them over here, we got dancers.
And we were on the other boat, and I think Mikayla and Alex, you probably both heard the call come in. Like, we heard them say dancers. I didn't hear the rest of it. I heard dancers, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I remember Kat was like, oh, if Gene's excited, then this is going to be really good,
But we didn't head over like immediately. We didn't like wrap it up and leave. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I misheard something. But then nope, another radio call came in. I heard dancers again, and it was like, all right,
we got to go.
Yeah.
And it was cool. We were very close to the Sea Hunter, the mothership, and they swam and danced right by the Sea Hunter, so the crew that was on the boat was able to see it from the mother boat. And then once we got past Sea Hunter, we got out of the water, and you guys got in. And I was so thrilled that they were still doing that, because I didn't know how long
Right.
you never know how long this can go on. Sometimes it's minutes. Sometimes I've heard it can be an extended time.
Yeah.
And I was so thrilled that you guys were able to get in, and that it wasn't just one tender that got the experience. Everybody got to experience that.
Yeah, because I think, Mikayla, you and I were right next to each other, and we got in, and like the female, I think it was the female, was like right underneath us, like almost when we got in. And Alex, you were there too. And she like rolled upside down as we were like, getting in, literally, like we were just in the water and looked down, and this humpback whale back up at that point rolls over, and I was just like, oh my God.
And wide-eyed
Yeah.
looking at you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was the eye contact on that encounter was
Yeah.
like off the charts.
Yeah, we obviously had really epic encounters with the cabs, but that last day with the dancers, with the 2 adults, was my favorite for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was incredible. And the female, we did get an ID that her name is Mojo.
And she's danced for them before, like 2 years almost to the day, I think it ended up being.
Yeah, which is just incredible.
Oh, awesome. That's really cool.
And we'll post some photos of her and some video of the dancers.
Yeah.
I mean, the escort didn't really do much. I mean, he was just there. He was watching too.
Ooh.
But yeah, that is the first time I've experienced it. I've wanted to every time. I mean, it is a peak experience, and I'm so glad that you guys got to experience that.
Yeah. No, they were cool whales.
Something I'm used to looking for back home, and on the flukes especially, that these 2 dancers both had were rake marks. They had scars on their flukes from something. It looked like killer whale rake marks.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. A lot of the humpbacks down there have rake marks from killer whales, most likely when they were calves. And we talked about this on the next week, wondering where it is that the killer whales are hanging out, waiting for them on their migration, probably somewhere off the continental shelf along the East Coast. And I don't think we know a whole lot about that population of killer whales, but it is incredible how many humpbacks on the Silver Bank have rake marks on their flukes.
And like for how few sightings of killer whales we have from, the East Coast, like it's always big news when like they're seen in Florida or in the Caribbean, whatever, it's big news when killer whales are seen. But like from the presence of rake marks on a lot of humpback whales that you're seeing, they have to be there in some number and up and down the coast.
Yeah. And I don't know much about the migratory path that the humpbacks take, but I'm wondering if it's, far offshore along the continental shelf, and that's where you'll get a good number of killer whales, especially on the spring migration.
Yeah.
Waiting for those new calves.
Yeah, especially if they're hungry and like they're gonna straight line it back to their feeding ground. That's gonna take them out kind of out in that range, I would think.
Well, I know we're all rooting for Floppy Disco to make it up to New England, and
she will.
And
she's gonna be him.
And baby Alice.
Baby Alice.
So amazing whale encounters. We had some fun on the boat as well.
Lots of fun on the boat.
No, it's terrible.
I loved just the
daily
routine. I loved the daily routine of living on the boat. The crew took such good care of us. Shout out to the crew. They were amazing. The whales were great, but I think the people really made that trip as awesome as it was. But yeah, you just wake up for sunrise, look for whales, watch the sunrise, go eat breakfast, get out on the tenders, swim with whales for a few hours, head back, eat lunch, go back out for a few hours. Oh, some of us would swim with sharks on our lunch break, and head back out on the water for more whale watching and swimming with whales, go back, shower, have some guacamole and cocktails on the deck, play some bananagrams, eat dinner, have like a educational presentation by one of our guides, and then go do some stargazing, and then do it all over again the next day for like 5 days. It was just incredible. And the crew was epic. Yeah.
Yeah, the daily schedule is awesome, and it's always you can always do more. You always want more.
It always leaves a little time for shenanigans.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
Some human clue.
We did play human clue. That was fun. Sarah ended up winning. Sarah won.
I did.
The champion.
Alex was my last kill.
Second place.
Jeff had a pretty epic murder of myself on the tender. Sara had an epic murder of myself up on the deck.
All of them. Sara killed all three of us.
I really wish I had that on video. Like, of all the videos I potentially missed that week, I wish my kill of Mikayla on the sun deck was the one I had on video.
I was on the dive deck putting some stuff away, and I heard the scream from down there.
It was just perfect. She did a phenomenal job, but...
So for those of you wondering, like, human clue, we have a person, we have an object, and then we have a location, and you have to, like, hand the object to the person.
And they have to
take it, and that's the kill.
And that's the kill. I got Mikayla with a wine glass on the tender.
That was a tough one.
It was a tough one.
And at first, I didn't want to take it, and you said, give it to Diego. I'm going to do anything for Diego. So I took it, and that made me really bitter. But they were both really good.
Yeah, that was a fun addition to the trip. But it was an amazing week out there. Huge shout out to Conscious Breath Adventures and Jean and Kat and Jeff.
Yeah, they know how to educate. They know how to make everybody feel welcome and have a great time and comfortable in the water with the whales. And they go over the safety incredibly well. And, Jean told us on the very first day going over safety, there may be times where you feel like you are close enough. The whales are so curious that you might be close enough to reach out and be able to touch them. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, this is just precautionary. There's no way that would ever be possible. There's no way they would ever come close enough for you to be able to touch a humpback whale. And then on day 2, I was sitting there like, wow, if I reached my arm out, I could touch this humpback whale. I could not even believe it. Just my mind is still blown. And it's been 2 weeks since we've gotten back. And I think about it all day, every day.
Me too.
I do love that part of the safety and the process of how we swim with whales, because he always follows that up. If you're ever close enough to touch a humpback whale, don't do it. And yeah, I
think that was the first time I really was that close enough to touch.
Well, I remember there was one of our mom calf interactions, Sara, you and I were next to each other in the line, and we had the calf came directly over to us and was facing us and stopped and just became totally still and was looking at us, and you and I looked at each other like, what are we supposed to do? And it was like 5 feet in front of us.
Humpback whale chicken?
Yeah, it was like 5 feet in front of us, and we're like, are we supposed to keep swimming? What are we supposed to do?
And Jeff, you warned me that could happen, and that you said on the way out, you said you're going to want to feel like you need to get out of their way because it looks like they're coming straight for you. But Alex, they know exactly where they're at. They're incredible, they're incredibly agile in the water. They're very spatially aware of themselves and of you. So you don't have to worry about that. You told me you've been out 7 weeks before, 8 weeks before, and just be comfortable. And still, when an animal that big is coming right at you, it's hard to fight that.
Yeah, it's
like a semi-truck coming
right. Exactly. It's very hard to fight that instinct, but they never make contact. They always
never make contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're predictable.
Like me. Unless you're like me, you will be swimming away. It's just crazy.
Well, it's your instinct, right? Your instinct is to move out of the way.
And Mom came up at one point and had the calf over her rostrum and was pushing the calf out of the water. And at one point, the calf rolled off of Mom's rostrum towards the line, and that was one point where I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if the calf is even fully in control right now. I'm starting to, and Jeff has a video of me kind of kicking back from that. But then, he said, you're going to go back. You're going to back up maybe 10 feet because you feel you're that close. And then you're going to watch everyone else just have this incredible close pass and this curious calf come right up and look everyone by. And they're not going to make contact either way. So just be patient and stay where you are and watch them, because you'll experience something incredible.
And one of the things, as we talk about this, and I think it's hard to comprehend for people that haven't been there, is the Jean and Jeff and Kat and the drivers are so good about positioning where the where we get in. So we are always downwind of the whales. So if you were stopped in the water, you're naturally going to drift away from them, right? So they're always thinking about that. Like, I don't usually think of like upwind and downwind when it comes to whales, but they do.
But they do, because
Specifically
you're
for
always
that.
downwind of them, so that you're not going to just, the current's not going to push you over them or into them. And so, yeah, when they are surfacing and they're coming towards you, you're sitting there and you're naturally being pushed away from them.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes some cardio some days, tell you what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that was the other thing, is that we were in the water a lot
Mm-hmm.
that week. And I've been out there, and some weeks you're in the water more than others. It's always great whale watching, but the week we were out there, we were in the water some days pretty much all day.
So you guys down to do it again?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 times I will say yes to that now. Which I said no the first time you guys invited me out, and I said no. I said, that's, it's a big commitment. It's, it takes a bit to get down there. It takes a bit of money to get down there. So, maybe I'll do it in the future. And then you guys asked again. And it was too hard for me to say no the second time, especially with so many of my friends going, so many of my people I've met through work, at work. And of course, I knew with all the podcast listeners coming out, it would be a great group no matter what.
Yeah, and shout out to the podcast listeners for signing up for this as well. This was really incredible. And yeah, it's hard to say no, and it's addicting. I've completed 9 weeks out there, and there's definitely going to be 10 and 11 and beyond, because it is different every time, and it's always life-changing, no matter how many times you do it.
We experienced a lot, but we didn't experience everything. And I had no basis for comparison for this trip. Like a few of the people, like you guys had done this before, and we had a couple other folks out there, Taylor and Don, who had been out before, and they all said that this trip was very full. There was like a lot of different behaviors that we saw, but even with this incredibly full, amazing trip, we still didn't see everything. And I would like to go back again to experience more and different behaviors. Getting in the water with a singer was one thing that we didn't get to experience this week. The other thing is, it was so incredible. I don't feel disappointed in anything. I don't feel, there was one day the whales just weren't around as much as they had been on some of the other days, and it was a lot more whale watching than whale swimming. Not 1 second did I feel disappointed, because the class of whale watching there is so incredible, even when you're not in the water with them. It's so different from seeing them in their feeding ground.
Yeah, and I think after we got off the boat, I was talking with Tasha and Sarah and a few other of our listeners that joined us, and they were saying, they were going to come back, right? But they were saying, like, man, if, I'm not sure about coming back because it was such an amazing week. How do you top that? And I'm like, well, for those of us, and they are them and you guys are them as well, like, that are obsessed with whales, you're always going to have a standout moment from any week that's going to make the trip worth it.
Absolutely.
But if you were just an average person who is checkboxing, I'm checking that off my list, don't ever come back. It was like,
right. This was a week. Yeah, this was a week that if you're one and done and you feel complete with this was the week to be able to experience that.
But there will always be something amazing
always
on any trip.
Yeah, every of the 9 times I've gone, every week is truly unique and very different, and there, like you said, there is always at least one, usually many standout moments from every time I've ever been there. And Conscious Breath Adventures does such an amazing job, and the education they provide is incredible. Between the education that they provide, because we see humpbacks quite a bit up here, but this is a feeding area, and so it's totally different behaviors. The education that we get from the experience on the Silverbank and the education that Conscious Breath provides us, it really gives us information that we use on our tours to complete the life cycle information and the full picture of humpback whales.
Yeah, it's definitely like a continuing education, furthering our own understanding of whales and humpback whales in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. one thing that stuck out to me from, I think it was Jean's presentation, that I kind of already knew, but it was cool to hear again how the moms are fasting, obviously, when they're migrating, give birth, have their calf, they're nursing, they might get pregnant again, and then they're migrating back and fasting on their migration back to their feeding grounds while either nursing or being pregnant or both. And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The education part of it was easily one of my favorite parts of the entire trip, hearing the presentations from each of the guys and multiple times, these incredible things you learn. And there were so many times where they would teach us something, and my first thought was, I can't wait to bring that back and talk about that on the trips that we run at Maya's Legacy. Like, we're out there with humpback whales and going down there and learning all of these facts from people who have been involved with humpback whale and cetacean research for over 3 decades, and actively in the water with humpback whales, teaching us about some of their behavior. Getting to bring that back home to San Juan Island and Friday Harbor out on the whale watching trips, I'm really excited for.
And if you guys are coming out to San Juan Island this summer and you see any of the 4 of us, you should definitely ask about our trip, and I'm sure we'd all be happy to share more memories from the trip.
Absolutely. And we are running half-day tours every day right now, and we'll be running into the fall and winter. And haven't seen humpbacks yet.
There have been some.
There have been some I think
juveniles,
yearlings
yep.
and juveniles, but in the next month we should start seeing some of the early returning humpbacks. And we have some all-day tours coming up, some podcast all-day tours.
May 20th and 21st. We have some seats left, so definitely reach out to us if you'd like to join Jeff and myself and potentially others for a fun 2 days on the water.
And if you're not available on those days, we also have September 20th and 21st.
17th and 18th, but close enough.
It's May 17th and 18th.
Okay, then I got it. Then I got it wrong. So May 17th and 18th and September 20th and 21st.
Yes. And then we're running half-day tours every day in the meantime. And then there are some Maya's Legacy whale watching full-day tours in August and September as well.
Yep.
And if you do book on our website, sjiwhalewatch.com, definitely mention you're a podcast listener. And apologies but my cat Nutmeg is
sabotaging
the episode here. And we'll post some videos and photos in the show notes so you can see some of the things that we talked about on this episode with our experience with humpback whales.
And thank you guys again so much for joining us both on the trip and today.
Thanks for having us on the podcast, you guys. It's a pretty big honor. It's pretty special. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Awesome to have you both on, and so awesome that you guys were on the humpback trip. And looking forward to seeing you two back here soon as we get our season.
And for trivia.
Yeah, I'm excited to come back to San Juan Island. I know I just spent a week swimming with humpback whales, but I already missed whales again.
Funny how that works.
Well, we'll see you guys soon. And yeah, thanks for joining us. That was a cool discussion. Always fun to relive those trips because even though it was just a few weeks ago, my adrenaline's still going from it.
Yeah, for sure. And always great to have Alex and Mikayla.
Absolutely. I'm sure.
I mean, first time on the podcast, but a dynamic duo.
Yeah, and it's fun to have more of our crew on the podcast. And if you come out here whale watching with us this season, you can meet any and all of us.
Yep.
So come on out. We're running tours daily. You can sign up at sjiwhalewatch.com. You can also reach out to Sara and I at afterthebreachpodcast@gmail.com, or we're on Facebook and Instagram and
Blue Sky.
We have really cool episodes coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime,
stay safe out there. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of After the Breach podcast. If you've enjoyed it and want to help us out, please share this with your friends, family, and any other whale-loving folks you can think of. We would also love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have topics you're interested in and would like to hear on the show, please send us an email. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can find us on Instagram as @AfterTheBreach and on Facebook as After the Breach Podcast. And if you'd like to go whale watching with us, then come on up to San Juan Island, Washington State. We run tours with Maya's Legacy Whale Watching, departing just steps away from the ferry landing in beautiful downtown Friday Harbor. It's a great destination for a day trip or multiple days and offers some of the best whale and wildlife viewing in the world. We would love to take you out on the water to see the amazing whales we talk about on our podcast. You can book a tour through the company website at www.sjiwhalewatch.com and make sure to mention you're a podcast listener when you book. Thanks again for listening, and remember, stay safe out there.